Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar with Phil Morgan on safe Wi-Fi in a dangerous world. We're going to be talking about security and the importance of that in Wi-Fi today. Well, we're not going to be talking about it. Phil is. And let me introduce you to him. He is a CWNT and a CWNE. He's worked with CWNP as a board member, helping to process CWNE applications, and as a board member helping to process CWISE applications. He is a dual expert certified individual with CWNP, having both his CWNE and CWISE, one of just a few, 8 in fact, people in the world that hold that credential set. And so quite an exciting accomplishment. And he brings a wealth of background and knowledge in the field of security. He has worked on assisting in the development of standards related to security. He has written much about it and spoke about it all over the world. And so we're excited to have Phil with us here today. And Phil, I'm going to turn it over to you and just go ahead and let you get rolling if you want to tell a little bit more about yourself, an NC expert, and then tell us about security.
Thank you, Tom. That was an awesome introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. So yeah, hello everybody. Welcome to Safe Wi-Fi in a Dangerous World. I work for a company called NC Expert. It was founded in 2011 in Silicon Valley. We're at the heart of technology, and we do consultancy, we do training. We're a Cisco partner, CWMP partner, CompTIA partner, ISC partner, blah, 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 blah. We work for, I was talking to someone the other day and I said, yeah, we've only got like 3 major companies, and that's the Fortune 500, the US government, and the US military. And I jokingly said that, you know, that's 3 customers, but that's basically like all the most important people, right? The military have a very interesting attitude about security. And I personally believe we are not paranoid enough, and we need to take on some of this paranoia because there are threats that exist and they are after us. So we have to protect ourselves from that. Here's a little bit about me. I've got the CEH, N+, S+, CISA, all the usual certifications. A little bit of a link to me if you want to follow up with me or look at one of my blogs. You're more than welcome to contact me and reach out and say hi. But let's get on with this. We've come here to learn about security. So I did a talk earlier on this year, and I've used this format since, where I define a conundrum is an intricate and difficult problem, and an enigma is something that's hard to understand or explain. And most people, when faced with conundrums or enigmas, stick their head in the sand and hope for the best. Okay? Some of the biggest conundrums we have today is, how do we stay safe in an ever-evolving world? How do we balance security with convenience? How do we remain secure without annoying our users? And that's the enigma. I can make you secure, but do you want to sign in 7 times every time you open a web page? And the answer is undoubtedly no. So we have to balance security with maintaining usability. And that's where it always falls apart. Security is important, or at least it should be. Okay? Let's start off with a very basic security premise. I have a saying that I always use, that inconvenience is a hacker's best friend. If it's inconvenient, people won't do it, and they'll expose themselves to threats and vulnerabilities. I firmly believe that we are not paranoid enough. And I want to make a statement now that longer is better than complex. This is an argument that has gone on for years. And I hopefully will prove the answer to this argument in this episode today. And we'll find out that longer is better than complex. What happens is, if you have a long password or a very, very complex password made of uppercase, lowercase, and numbers, what most people will do is write it down somewhere. And that immediately invalidates the security of the system. Now, if they write it down on a piece of paper and put it in their safe, that's one thing. But most people will write down the password and stick it on a yellow sticky on the back of their keyboard. Okay? Let's define some terms. A vulnerability is a weakness, a flaw, or an error. A threat is a potential use of a vulnerability that can be used to cause damage. The attacker or the threat agent is the bad guy or gal. Now, unfortunately, hackers, as we call them, and that's a misuse of the word. Hackers are people that are interested and want to know how it works, but it's been misused by the media to be the bad person. Crackers or threat actors are what we call the bad people. Hackers are just interesting people. Typically, you probably employ hackers to defend you from the bad people. But the term hacker is used in the industry and in the media as a bad person. Okay? These threat actors, we'll call them, don't walk around in hoodies. Don't believe anything you see on television about threat actors. There's a famous movie that I won't mention where literally the screen is so bright, it's shining on this gentleman's face, and he types in the command bypass password. I'm in. And it really doesn't work that way. But it's not far off. An exploit is an attacker using a threat, or it's said to be exploiting a vulnerability. Risk is the likelihood of success compared to damage caused. And risk is also the potential for loss. And loss is how much it costs us. Now, it may not cost money in the sense that they steal money from the bank of wherever. Okay. However, if you bank with the bank of wherever, and it's in the media that the bank of wherever has had money stolen from it, you are typically going to take your money out of the bank of wherever and move it to somewhere that you perceive as safer. And so it's the hidden loss of future customers that can damage you when you are hacked, not necessarily what is stolen from you. So top threats are usually quite common, quite well known. Malware, phishing, ransomware, denial of service, inadequately securing your company, lack of proper information sharing and reporting. Criminal organizations, if a criminal organization or a nation state threat actor is coming at you, you are going to find it very difficult to defend against that. And you may have to engage with federal services in the United States or governmental services wherever you are to help defend you. And they will help you do this, especially if you're like an industry, like a bank or something. They are set up to help you defend against threats, especially if they come from outside the country as well. You may simply have rogue or shadow IT operations inside your company. You may have out-of-date software and firmware. I almost cry every time I hear it when someone says, yeah, we have an old Windows 95 system that runs that, isn't updated anymore. And I jokingly say that don't worry, these systems are only usually running the cooling system on a nuclear reactor or something. And people laugh at this, but you'll be surprised how often this is true, that a bespoke system that has not been patched for years is running some kind of critical system inside a company or a corporation. There are systems that you may not even know about that are still running. Okay? And the thing is, the threat actors are very good at finding these weaknesses. So there is the CISA security agency, the NCA in the UK. There's enterprises that have been created to help us defend ourselves. And most of these enterprises are free to use. They're also chargeable as well, some of the more advanced ones. But there's a lot of free information you can get how to make yourself more secure. Other threats, and I won't go through all of these, you can read through them. One of the most important things you have to do, imagine you're the King of England. You identify your crown jewels, and you spend a lot of money protecting them. So Coca-Cola, for example, their crown jewel would be the recipe for Coca-Cola. Kentucky Fried Chicken, the recipe for the spice they use. What is your most important asset? And that's what we call your crown jewels. and you've got to keep them safe. Now, every company will have their own classification of their own crown jewels. It may be a new piece of software you're developing, or a new aeroplane, fighter jet you're developing, as the US government, for example. Picking from this list, most typically, poor cyber hygiene is one of the worst things that affects most people. Just like it's not good to not shower or shampoo your hair, it's also not good to have cyber hygiene. Recent threats, okay, recent outages. Just read the news. A lot of these were in the UK. The UK and the European authorities broke down the Kronos operation, which was the lockpick ransomware, a variation of ransomware that infected machines and encrypted them until you paid money. I had a conversation with someone recently where they said, do you know anything about Bitcoins? I said, a little bit. Why'd you ask? I got a ransomware message on my screen. And I was like, oh my gosh, you need to reach out to the authorities and let's work through this. And I witnessed something that I've never seen before. The accountant was really worried because it had encrypted his disk and all his customers' data was on the disk. Now, the official FBI response is do not pay the ransom. Do not pay the ransom because you won't get the keys and they'll come back and do it again because you paid, okay? But this particular accountant needed to make a payment because he was coming towards the end of the year and he needed to get the data back. And so I told him what I recommended he did, speak to the FBI, speak to the law enforcement and so on. And what he did was he reached out and said, okay, how do I pay? And he was contacted by a third party. And the third party said, I'm nothing to do with these. I'm just a man in the middle. You give me the money and I will make sure you get the keys to unencrypt the data. And I thought that's a novel concept. So he wasn't really breaking the law. He's just a man in the middle. And so the accountant said, how much? And it's $5,000. And he said, well, I can't really afford $5,000. And the response that came back was, how much can you afford? So they were actually negotiating to get the keys to the crypto lock. And I don't know how much he settled for in the end, but they took some amount of money off him. He got the keys, got his data back, and then, of course, he installed anti-malware, antivirus, and so on and so forth. But the key point that I thought was interesting was these people were prepared to negotiate. I can't afford 5,000. Can you afford 2? And so that's what the world is today. And again, be very careful. The FBI recommends you do not negotiate with these people because they will take your money. They won't give you your keys back anyway. But the story I just told you was a surprise. He did get the keys back. Lots and lots of threats came out recently on aeroplanes and airports. A gentleman in Australia had set up a evil twin to get people's authentications on the aeroplanes. I'm laughing, not because it's comical, because I can't believe he got away with this. And you gotta shake your head in disbelief that this actually worked. He stole their accounts and then used their accounts to log on and get free Wi-Fi. But most people, when presented with this screen that said, log in here, happily logged in with their airline privileged user account. So this happens. Today, there's online marketplaces that can be reached on the dark web. There's ransomware as a service you can hire. Okay? Now, all of this is illegal, but as fast as the law enforcement agencies are shutting them down, they are moving somewhere else and coming back up again. So today, the threat is real. What do they want? They want your technology, your money, your data, your customers, or maybe your Bitcoins. Simple things we can do at the start is we can get better cyber health, have security, test our security, do pen testing. Run VPNs whenever we're out of the office. Have safe guest networks. Now, this is a personal peeve of mine. Captive portals are dead, or they should be. Look at open roaming, an easy way to onboard with certificates, guest networks. But of course, they have to be onboarded before they connect. And captive portals, by the way, are not the problem here. It's client vendors trying to improve our captive portal experience that causes the problems. Like if I asked anybody had a problem with a captive portal, with a captive portal, I'm sure everybody would put their hand up. There are Trojan devices that pretend to be one thing that are something else. Okay? Never, ever plug somebody else's USB device into your computer under any circumstances. Don't plug into coffee shops and airports and hotel USB chargers. I have a little protector that I use that disables data and only allows power. I also carry a battery pack with me. My battery pack can give power while being recharged. I will plug the battery pack into the airline port, and I will plug my battery pack into my device and take power. Phil, that's a little paranoid. My response to that, thank you. That's a compliment to me, not an insult. People who are paranoid tend not to get hacked. Now, I'm not talking silver foil hat paranoia, okay? I'm talking about realistic paranoia. Be a little bit more concerned about your security. If you looked at typical threats, some of the most, or if not the number one threat, is uninformed users. Users that don't do good cyber hygiene, okay? They'll give up their passwords. They'll write down the passwords and leave it on a yellow sticky on the screen. Train them to not do this. One of the best things you can do to make your cybersecurity world safer is to train your users in basic fundamental cyber hygiene. And now this is very important. You've got to establish a security policy and you've got to enforce it. The number of times I've seen a cyber policy where, you know, if you download illegal copies of movies with BitTorrent, you'll be fired on the spot. And then the senior salesperson who brings in $10 million a year gets caught downloading illegal movies and they decide not to fire them because they bring $10 million a year. That's inconsistent and it shouldn't be that way. I'm not telling you how to do it. It's between you and your company. But if somebody else is fired for downloading something that somebody else isn't, now you've opened yourself to a case where they can sue you for unfair dismissal. Okay, and I leave that to the lawyers to argue. I will not pretend to give you legal advice. I am not a lawyer. Okay, I'm just telling you a story. Your policy must be kept up to date. Practice good cyber hygiene. Go into your PNL, your preferred network list, go into your Wi-Fi configuration on your device, and do you still have that vacation place that you stayed at 3 years ago as a saved SSID? You shouldn't, okay? You shouldn't have that. You should clear out your PNL. Now, Apple, love them to bits, but Apple only gave us this feature about 9 months ago. Prior to this, you had to completely wipe everything and then start adding your SSIDs again. And that is incredibly inconvenient. Remember that? Inconvenience is a hacker's best friend. Here's a bit of fun that I tell people that really makes them uncomfortable. Do you know who has your home Wi-Fi password? I bet you all your kids' friends have your home Wi-Fi password. Because when they came to visit, your kids let them log on to your network. All right? Any family that's come to stay have your home Wi-Fi password. Do you change it? Bet you don't. In my house, we have the family network. Okay? Every 6 months or so, I change the password. My network at home, I have my office network that I connect to. I don't connect to the family network. That's for the Apple TV and the family to connect to. I have my own network with my own firewall on it, separate firewall to the one that the family has. Phil, that sounds a little paranoid. Thank you very much. If you've never experienced this, go on to Wiggle. Find your house on Wiggle and see if your SSID is found on Wiggle. I recommend that people use a generic name for their Wi-Fi network. Don't use like 27B Weatherby Street as your SSID because it's obvious who that is. So any form of anonymity you can enforce is helpful because a lot of people don't realize this, but you will advertise those SSIDs when you're away at a conference in Las Vegas. So if I'm looking for advertisements, SSID probes, I just wait long enough and I'll see you advertise for 27B Weatherby Street. If I go into Wiggle and search for that SSID, oh, look, there's 27 Weatherby Street, San Jose, California. So now not only do I know your SSID, I also know where you live. That's quite scary. So Wi-Fi, is it secure? Well, yes. Pause for dramatic effect when configured correctly. Some would argue it's safer than Ethernet because Ethernet doesn't have any encryption. Here's a famous cartoon that talked about how complex passwords, okay, are very easy for computers to guess, but very hard for people to remember, and how we've successfully trained ourselves over years and years of security practice to use passwords that computers are easy to guess. Whereas if you used 4 words, obviously you don't use these 4 words now. They're the first ones the hackers and the crackers will test. By using 4 words, it becomes infinitely more difficult for a computer to crack, but easy for you to remember. And this is a point I want to raise. By using passwords that are 4 common words or so, it's much stronger than a large password with lots of uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. And if you don't believe me, Google it. I did a quick search in preparation for this. Is a longer password better than a complex one? And there's some websites at the top that are very interesting to read. The government of Singapore, yes. The United States FBI, yes. NIST, yes. Gov UK, yes. European Agency for Cybersecurity, yes. The Daily Mail, yes. The Guardian, yes. Now, if you know anything about England, these are 2 papers that are on complete opposite end of the spectrums, and they never agree on anything, but they agree that, yes, longer passwords are better than more complex ones. In the UK, GCHQ, yes, there are links there that you can go to, and you can search why they are better. They are easier to remember, and they are, because of the length, because they are 20 to 25 characters maybe, it's the length that makes it unbreakable to computers. Okay, let's take a quick overview of security history and theory, okay? So Wi-Fi, problem with Wi-Fi is it's a broadcast media. We broadcast our information out. Anybody can listen to it. Now, this is very important. Just because you walk around the perimeter of your building with your iPhone doesn't mean that nobody outside your building can hear the Wi-Fi. If I use my special antenna, I can hear your signal from half a mile away. Thank you very much. So distance should never be used as a security method. So I want to emphasize that there are monsters in the world that we need to be protected from. People that are trying to steal our information, our data, our money, our customers, and our bitcoins. This is one of my favorite quotes. Dance like nobody's watching, but encrypt like everyone is. So quick foundation, what do we need? So first of all, we need to find the network, and we do that with beacons and probes. And today we have 82LM-K and V that help us connect to the network. Then we join the network. We authenticate, we associate, then we have some kind of security that we use to keep us safe. We started off using WEP in the early days. WEP is no longer adequate enough. WPA was a short-term fix to WEP while we worked on something better. Eventually, WPA2 came out, which solved all the problems of WEP and WPA. But then it started getting its own problems as it grew older. Today, WPA3 is the solution to WPA2. So in WPA2, you have two ways you can operate: without security and with security. Really simple. What do I mean without security? So you're in a coffee shop or a hotel or an airport. There's no security. But you should really, as a minimum, have some kind of after captive portal type effect. Now, I've got to say grr there, because captive portals have just brought out loads of more problems you're going to get. And this is where something like the Wireless Broadband Alliance Open Roaming comes in. When I land at Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport, my phone and my laptop automatically connect with a certificate network to the WBA Open Roaming Network. Ultra secure, I haven't got to do anything. That's the beauty of open roaming. And those are the solutions we should be looking at today and getting our guest users to operate with. It's a little difficult to onboard the vendor network. And difficult, I mean, it's not 3 checkboxes. It's not impossible, it just takes some work. But the client side is very easy to onboard. So there are 2 ways to use security in WPA2, personal and enterprise. Personal is for small home office, home office networks. Enterprise is for larger networks that need more protection. Personal is known as PSK. It's kind of a personal password for you and your house is what it was aimed at. Unfortunately, personal networks are used in the enterprise, and a lot of people don't realize how inadequate they are. Hopefully in about 10 minutes, you'll decide you want to turn off your personal network in the office because you've realized how insecure it is, or upgrade to newer standards. So, and I can't keep a straight face when I say this. Personal networks are safe as long as you change the password every so often, maybe every 30 days, change the password when someone leaves the company, or use a serious level of length or complexity. But all of these are very inconvenient. So most people run and use enterprise. Okay? Problem with the enterprise is you can simply click OK when presented with a new certificate, which I'm going to bluntly say is quite possibly the dumbest thing to ever be allowed. Because you do know if you allow it, your users will do it, right? Don't allow it. Turn it off in your group policy. Turn it off in your MDM control. But Phil, this is so inconvenient. Do you see the theme here? Enterprise requires the use of EAP and Radius. Will need certificates or a Cisco variant, EAP fast. Devices will need to be onboarded. Will cause work. It's inconvenient. Arguably the safest mode of Wi-Fi security today. Pause for dramatic effect. When configured correctly. If you turn off certificate validation and WPA2 enterprise, you may as well go back to using WEP. It's more secure. Not going to go into details. That's for another time. Come on the CWSP class. If you are using WPA2 personal, you will have a pre-shed key. That's the passphrase. The passphrase is not the pre-shed key. The passphrase is mixed 4,096 times with the SSID to create the pre-shed key. The pre-shed key is used to create the pairwise master key. Pairwise master key is the granddaddy key that is used to create all the other keys via the 4-way handshake. Please understand, if you are using WPA2 personal pre-shed key, everyone, every time they connect, have the same passphrase. Therefore, they have the same PSK. Therefore, they have the same PMK. If I break your passphrase, I own your network. In the past, now, and forever. If I break your PSK by guessing your passphrase, I can decrypt all the traffic on your network if I capture the four-way handshakes of the individual stations as well. Short passphrases are fairly easy to crack. If you use .1x, EAP, radius, WPA2 enterprise, it is very, very difficult to break the MSK. The MSK is created at the end of the .1x exchange and is used to create the PMK that is used as the granddaddy key to create all the other keys. Now, very important, if you use WPA2 enterprise, excuse me, everyone, every time they connect, has a unique MSK and therefore a unique PMK. Much more difficult to break. So, surely it's not that easy to break. What it is, if you happen to be a person that had a computer you built to do mining, Bitcoin mining 5-7 years ago, doesn't make you any money anymore, but is really, really good at doing math and breaking passwords. Candy123 with a capital C. I fed it into this machine. I did a four-way handshake capture, and I didn't do a dictionary attack. I did a brute force attack. It took less than a minute to say the password used on this SSID is Candy123. Today, NIST are recommending you have passwords longer than 18 characters, which means that's a lot of complex numbers and characters to remember, unless you make it memorable words, right? That's important to you. It's not difficult to capture these things. This suite of software is available in Kali Linux to capture and help you do hacking and pen testing. This little toy, excuse me, this little, I say toy, it's not a toy. This little guy is based on the Tamagotchi. He makes happy little faces when you feed it four-way handshakes, and he will collect four-way handshakes for you. Here you can see one plugged into a little battery pack that I can just carry around in my backpack. Probably shouldn't do this at airports, police stations, and government buildings, right? And by the way, this guy, if you put it in rude mode, it will de-authenticate people to make them re-authenticate so it can capture their four-way handshakes. This guy, the flipper, it got banned in Canada, then Canada unbanned it. Okay. It can collect four-way handshakes. So what's wrong with WPA2? All right? It's nearly 20 years old. It's susceptible to de-authentication spoofing attacks. You can use the tools I just told you and showed you to do four-way handshake attacks and capture their four-way handshakes. Passwords can then be cracked offline. Once I know your pre-shared key, I own your network. This WPA2 happily lets you say, do not use encryption. And here you can see I've got no, as in Luke, I am your father. No, think that. Other attacks have come out against it. Is there hope? 2024, we're planning to send people to Mars to live. Our phones have more raw processing power than 1960 supercomputers. We have robots that can vacuum our floors, clean our pools, and cut our grass. What do we do about the problems with WPA2? Use stronger, longer passwords. The end. That's all we got. Okay? So, what does the future look like? Well, the future is WPA3. Magical unicorns and glorious security. WPA3, next generation security, simplifies and enhances Wi-Fi security. Robust authentication, increased cryptographic strength, disallows legacy weak protocols. Enforces protected management frames, edited to LMW. In summary, Fixes the problem with WPA2, all of them. Super duper mega awesome. It separates the pre-shed key from the generation of the PMK. This one step makes WPA3 infinitely more secure. Okay? So WPA3 personnel is resistant to offline dictionary attacks, stronger protection against password guessing attempts, protection for users that use easy to guess password. That was me joking, guys, right? That's me pretending not to say stupid passwords. Okay? Easy to guess passwords. So you can use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 as your PSK, and you now have hardcore encryption that can't be reverse engineered on your data. The changes are invisible to users as long as their devices support it. Okay? You've also got forward secrecy. If I capture your data today and I find your PSK in a year's time, I cannot reverse engineer your data easily. So you've got forward protection. A note here, all operation in 6 gigahertz demands WPA3, no exceptions. So going back to remember the four-way handshake, where the PMK is gotten from the PSK if you're doing personnel, or the MSK if you're doing enterprise. Now we have a 4-exchange authentication mode that results in the creation of a PMK. So everybody, every time they connect the WPA3 personnel, has a unique PMK. So the weakness of breaking the pre-shed key in WPA2 is fixed. WPA3 Enterprise is a testament to WPA2 Enterprise. WPA3 Enterprise is WPA2 Enterprise with 802.11w protected management frames. Protected management frames. This cannot be disabled. This again is invisible to users as long as their clients have it. There is a even more complex 192-bit cryptographic strength version that's used for people who are truly paranoid about their crown jewels, government, military, healthcare, finance, and so on. Now, this isn't a part of WPA3. It came with WPA3, and this is quite simple. You now get opportunistic wireless encryption. You have an open network with encryption. Okay, so now you've got a third option in your defense against the evil hackers and crackers trying to take over the world. And simply what happens is it uses an elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman exchange in the association phase to give you a pairwise master key that can be used by the four-way handshake. Now, don't get hung up on this. Elliptic curve, just think bigger, better, faster, stronger encryption mechanism than what we used before. And you'll see EC elliptic curve all over the place now. Really, really useful for IoT devices, by the way, because it requires less ProSim power than the predecessors. So now your IoT devices can be secure as well. And so now everyone, every time they connect to an open network, also gets encrypted data flow, which is wonderful. And literally, WPA3, turn it on, use it, the end. Okay? If you do nothing except follow the instructions on this slide, your network will be infinitely more secure. All right? Now, that should be the end, but it isn't. The problem we have is not all clients support WPA3. I turned WPA3 on my Eero network at home. My son says, hey, Dad, my iPad won't connect to the network anymore. And I'm like, well, mine connects. Never really helpful advice. Well, mine's working. Please don't do that. It never helps. And I thought, oh, I better take a look then. I'll take a look later. And then my daughter says, hey, Dad, my iPad's not working. I'm like, This is not their iPads, it's probably me. I turned off WPA3 and they immediately connected. I said, can you run an update? And it turns out they hadn't run an update for like a year. They updated their iPads to the latest version of Apple software. I turned WPA3 back on and everybody connected, right? So it's not that the iPads weren't compatible with iPad 3, it's that they needed a software update. And that's a separate story. Do patch updates frequently. Moving forward, we may need to have the same SSID on 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz as clients roam between the two frequencies. Well, because 6 gigahertz is still in the early stages and we're still getting used to it. The problem here is 6 gigahertz mandates WPA3, PMF. 5 gigahertz allows transition mode. If you configure different settings on 6 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, you will end up with a world of pain. Okay? If you use WPA3 Enterprise, most of it works. If you use WPA3 Personal, you will get to learn new swear words. Give it up. Different vendors will work differently. Different clients will work differently. You'll have problems roaming from 6 to 5 and 5 to 6. If you configure different security settings on the 5 gigahertz and the 6 gigahertz, and you have the same SSID, you'll spend hours troubleshooting and you'll just get problem after problem. Is there a solution? Well, we've spent years training people in 2.4 gigahertz, only use channel 16LM. Don't do channel bonding in 2.4 gigahertz. Use 20/40 channel bonding, not 80. 20 if you can, 40 if you really have to, in 5 gigahertz. Don't use the same SSID on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz and reduce the number of SSIDs you use. That's the rules we've built over the last 20 years of Wi-Fi. Our solution to the WPA3 problems are, number one, don't use 6 gigahertz. That's a little bit radical. Second option, use 6 gigahertz, but have two 5 gigahertz SSIDs. The first one is compatible with the settings of 6 gigahertz. So you have an SSID on 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz that has the same settings. But Phil, we really need transition mode or WPA2 functionality. Okay, create a second SSID on 5 gigahertz only that fulfills the needs of all those older clients. And as you upgrade clients, move them over to the WPA3 SSID, WPA3 only. Don't use transition mode. I really don't like transition mode. Turn it on, use it, see what problems you get. Turn it off and all the problems go away. So for the foreseeable future, we are typically going to have the same SSID on 5 and 6 gigahertz. And we may have to create another SSID, an additional SSID, instead of turning on transition mode on the dual gigahertz SSID. And this will solve a lot of the problems you have, well, all of the problems you have, roaming from 6 to 5 gigahertz. Because the 5 and the 6 gigahertz SSIDs use the same SSID with the same security parameters. Okay, so all those problems melt away. Other tips, use the whips. Really use one. Know your environment. Know what's normal. Know what's abnormal. Use DNS security. Something like Cisco Umbrella. The first thing a piece of malware does when it infects your computer system is calls home to some kind of command and control server. Cisco Umbrella is a DNS resolution service that says, you know what? I'm not going to let you connect to nasty hacker virus.ru or something. Nope, I'm not letting you go there. And that's literally stop the infection, or stop the infection escalating at least. Use protected management frames. Turn them on and use them. Again, this has transition mode. Be careful with transition mode. Things that don't work. MAC address filtering. SSID hiding. As a pen tester / nice hacker, If I'm walking down the road and I see somebody with a hidden network, I'm like, oh, what have they got to hide then? Okay. So you may cause people to attack you if you hide the SSID name, because it doesn't hide the SSID. It just shows up as hidden SSID. Any old security systems really should be gotten rid of now. Today, it should be WPA3 only. It's really difficult to not use personal in the office. I can give you 100 reasons why not to use WPA3 personal in an office environment. And every single time, somebody will raise their hand and say, yes, but I got this requirement. Everybody's like, but Phil, it's always going to come. You have to do what you have to do. But if you have to use personal, use WPA3 personal. Don't use transition mode. If you use WPA3 transition on 5 gigahertz only, Phil, it's okay, it's on 5 gigahertz only. But do you not understand that if I turn up, I can configure my client to say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a WPA2 client. The AP will now let me connect this WPA2, and now you're vulnerable to all the WPA2 hacks. Use multiple SSIDs for each frequency. Separate 2.4 and 5, but you can do 5 and 6 if you need to. Okay. Have a different SSID, the WPA2 and the WPA3 clients on 5 gigahertz. Now, here's a little test I give people. I do a pen test on a customer site, and they're quite proud that they've done exactly what I've said, and they have separate networks. I then hack the WPA2 password, and I test it on the WPA3 personal, and they've used the same password as WPA2 on WPA3. And I sink my head into my hands, and I show my unhappiness, and they suddenly realize, oh yeah, we see that. Don't use the same password on the WPA2 personal and the WPA3 personal. Please don't do that. Isolate your networks. Isolate your guest networks in particular. Keep your software, your firmware up to date. If you are truly serious about security and you really want to defend your systems, consider TLS-based options. Okay? Last but one thing, create a security policy, teach it to your employees, enforce it, test your security, hire a pen tester. Who would you rather breaks in, the nasty hacker or the nasty threat actor, or the nice person that you're paying to test your security who writes a lovely report at the end and tells you what's wrong? Test your perimeters. Use vulnerability scanners. There are free tools available that you can run that says, hey, you know the SQL server you're using is not being patched for the last year, right? Free tools. There are paid for ones that are even better. Manage your patches. Please manage your patches. Do not have unpatched, oh, that's spelled wrong, unpatched systems that are weeks, months, or years out of date. Consider advanced SOC practices. Implement a SIM, implement a SOAR, do threat hunting, use threat intelligence feeds. If you're a pig farmer, you don't care about attacks on hospitals. If you're a hospitals, you don't care about attacks on pig farmers. Okay? The threat intelligence feeds can tell you this is what's currently going on, and a lot of them are free to sign up to. Create a response plan, be ready. Please be more paranoid. But Phil, these are so inconvenient, right? Last thing, WPA3, turn it on, use it. Really this time, the end. A little bit of information if you want to connect again to me or look at my blogs. And that's it. Thank you very much. We are done.